Welcome to Earth, a Love Story. I'm your host, Robin Lassiter. This week, we meet Tyler Deal. After a near-death experience from a mountain bike accident, Tyler was propelled into the world of self-healing, where he was forced to examine deep-seated trauma. The self-healing and inner silence has given him gifts that have allowed him to make a profound connection with all life. Today, Tyler works remotely with individuals from all over the world, showing them how to heal themselves while implementing his own gifts for transformation. Over the years, Tyler has discovered the heart of listening to the physical body when his clients would discuss life's challenges, and found what looked like molecular blocks within the nervous system as physical manifestations from multi-layered belief systems, trauma, and subconscious memories. You can find out more about Tyler's work by visiting his website, radicalheartworks.com, or by checking the show notes. I hope that you enjoy our conversation.
I guess I don't really know who I am, and I don't know if I ever will know who I am. And I say that because it's like every moment that we live, we see ourselves a certain way, and that might not be who we really are. And even people that I see in my experience as spiritual teachers, that's also still an appearance. Mm-hmm. So I'm okay with completely not knowing who I am. And I just know that this, whatever this is, exists. Mm-hmm. And I think that simplifies it for me. So I don't feel like I'm on a journey discovering my true self or what my true nature is, or all these terms we hear in the spiritual community. I think for me personally, I don't care so much about that. I care more about, just appreciating my own existence and my own experience, whatever that is, bad, good, however, whatever duality terminology we want to use. So that's kind of my focus today. And then I can go back, but my focus today is learning how to appreciate and this existence, whatever that is, and however that unfolds for me. So I could say, going back the first 4 years of my childhood, I was a very happy kid, like most children, not all children, like most children are at a young age. They don't have any responsibilities. They're not trying to be anything. They find delight in the simplest of things. Humor comes spontaneously. Mm-hmm. All of these things that adults are trying to get back to today. Right. I was that, I guess, quintessential happy, open kid. So today people might say, oh, well, children are awake. I guess that would be the closest thing to being what awakeness is, or just being free or liberated. Mm. So I was that kid. And I think because I was that way, I had a connection with the earth. I saw all things as alive, even what we consider inanimate objects. I had names for things. I mean, I had weird names for people that had haircuts, like I had a bowl cut, and I can't remember the name I had for that. I had like blonde hair and like this bowl cut, but I would label these names that didn't even make sense. Like somebody had a melon cut or a Bobby Newsine cut. Mm. So I was very creative in everything that I saw and interacted with. I think like a lot of kids are, and I felt we had an orchard. It was about 1.5 acres or 2 acres. This is in Northern California, a little town called Los Altos, which now is like a huge part of the Silicon Valley. But back then in the 70s, in the late 70s, it was just a little town. And I enjoyed my life, I can say. My story is remembering enjoying my life. Mm. My parents would host a lot of parties. And so I remember just running out there and entertaining them, even if it was nonsense, but I didn't consider it nonsense. I'd like to make people laugh. That was my joy. and actually became my joy later in life. And I still like to do that. So my childhood up to that point was very, very free. My parents had made a decision. My dad was going to move his company, or he did, which means move the family to Washington State. When I was about 4, it was about 6 months before my 5th birthday. And I didn't know what was going on. Like a lot of kids do. They don't know what the parents make decisions, and you just go along with it and think that everything's okay. And even in the car ride up to Washington, I was happy and singing and everything. And then just something kind of like this cloud came over me. And I can even look at my pictures on my 5th birthday, and I could see like this veil or cloud came over me. And I don't know what it was. I can't describe exactly what that was, but it was just a shift in energy. And I began to taste what unhappiness is, or that sense of sadness and depression. And as a kid, when you're so young, you're not thinking about who you are, who you're becoming. So when these kinds of things happen, or these kinds of energies come into you, it was kind of a shock to my system. I began to see that my parents fought more. My dad was ultra conservative, and my mom's always been pretty liberal. So there was this, it's like, how did these two people ever come together? Right? And my sister, I noticed, who's 3 years older than me, she had withdrawn a lot. So she was with friends, and she didn't want to really be around mom and dad. And we still played a little bit, but she was getting older, and she was trying to discover who she was and what was making her happy. So this cloud, getting back to that, it just felt like a lot of sadness and depression, and then just witnessing a lot of fighting in the family. Some emotional, some physical, just some abuse, and seeing my mom get really sad, and seeing my dad trying to keep his business going, and always be traveling all the time, then coming back home and feeling a fear, and like this deep fear. And so I would actually wait. I could feel this fear coming, like an hour before he came home, and then I would try to go hide, and everything that I would do, he was putting me down. So it was like, I would cut my hair a certain way. I started taking ballet classes, which I loved. He would make fun of me for that. So all of these things, I didn't have a real strong sense of who I was, in the sense that I didn't like who I was. I was made to feel bad about enjoying myself as a kid, or trying to develop use my creativity in certain ways, such as ballet and soccer. And so it really kind of came down to me, in a way, protecting my mom from my dad, and then also trying to stay away from my dad at the same time. So it was a hard childhood. And then 1988, my parents separated. They didn't divorce, they separated, and I went and lived with my mom. And then I was about 12 or 13, and then I felt the sense of freedom again. I started to feel the sense of freedom and connection with people. I went from going to private schools to public schools, and I was really happy once I made that, or that decision was made. I started to, go into the forest more. I started to ski in the mountains. So my rekindling with nature became strong again. And I made some really amazing friends through high school. But at the same time, I was like kind of this rebel teenager. I mean, I lived outside of Seattle, so I would, go into the city and see all these bands, go to parties, started to, smoke a lot of marijuana, take a lot of acid, drink a lot on the weekends. So that wasn't really helping me either with, as a teenager. And I think that substance abuse probably kind of accelerated that depression once again, and not liking myself. And it was reflected in my environment, even though I had friends and I was, doing my thing, it was still like I still felt pretty shitty about myself. So, I mean, I know this is a lot. There's so much in between, right? When you look back at your past, it's like, yeah. And then I went off to college. I applied for one school, Humboldt State University in Northern California in Arcata. And I got in. I got like a 600 on my SATs, which is horrible, like total. But my grades were good. So I got into the school, and that began to change things as well. So I don't know how much further you want me to go. Do you want me to go into my time there, or do you want to stop and ask questions, Robin?
Yeah, well, I certainly resonate with a lot of what you're saying, and, reflecting on that, the time when you were so young and feeling all of this joyfulness and sort of what I call a kind of blueprint that we come in with that's just particular to us. And there was a time in my life when I was very close to that blueprint and it felt very easy, and then the shock comes in and that kind of sets us on this path. And as you were talking, I was wondering, like, does it have to be that way? Do we have to to sort of fall out of that that goodness and blueprint as children, or what would it be like if things were different? I don't know. So those were kind of the things that I'm thinking about. And of course, the substance abuse, that's my history as well. Just feeling very sensitive and not feeling great about myself and looking for an escape. And that works great for a while. Yeah. Till it doesn't.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I don't know if that's what we signed up for. It's I have no way of knowing because I can't physically see my blueprint right now. I mean, if I could, maybe it is. Maybe we do choose our parents. Maybe we do choose our path. Again, it's like I have to go back to my own experience. I can hear all these things in the community. This is, you're meant to be here. This is an amazing time on earth. And all of that's great, but I have to come back to, am I experiencing that or not? If I haven't, then I have to ask questions with myself, or just be open to experiencing whatever, right? I do believe we come in as pure spirit. I don't think that all of our spirit can come into our body because that would be too much. But I believe our spirit's always with us, even if part of it's in our body and part of it's around. I feel like there is like this greater power. I don't even want to say power, but greater beingness. Whether you call that God or the ultimate creator, whatever, that is kind of orchestrating things. But it's like, why would she, I say she, but why would she actually give us the suffering? I don't know. Maybe we're like renegades to come here and to help shift things and to bring our own love and our own signature and to help other people kind of pull them out of the darkness. So maybe that the trauma, maybe the hard times is what we need to experience so to help other people. That's kind of what I believe, because otherwise how could there be a reference point for people to understand, like, or help somebody coming to you? Maybe they had all this trauma and you had something similar, or at least had the same similar experience as you, right, Robin? But if you didn't have any of that and somebody came to you, it's like, how useful is that? Or how could you actually help somebody? I don't know. Yeah. You can get all the training in the world to deal with this, but if you haven't actually been through, even if it's not the same thing, but the same feeling or the same kind of experience, similar, then I think you can be, you can be there for them and help them.
Yeah. I mean, so much of what you said, first of all, this idea of, we do hear all of these things in the community, right? We hear that sound pretty great, especially like I clung to a lot of those things at first, and I still do. I still check in with them and test them out, but I completely agree that that checking in with the experience that's come through my body, with my personal experience, it is the thing that I don't even I couldn't even say for sure what an experience exactly is. Are these lights, are these beings of lights? Are they ETs? I do believe that there are nature spirits. I believe there's a lot of things going on, but I couldn't say exactly what it is, but I know that it happened to me, and I know that it went through my body, and that I have a loose narrative around it so that I can live through it in a way that feels really authentic to me. So I'm not constantly checking in with the external. Like, the external definitely still informs me, but it's our experiences. I think the experiences are my sort of foundation and where my feet are, and if I get confused or overwhelmed with these questions, I go back to them and I think, okay, what do I know? I know that I experienced this. I know I experienced this. Yeah. And then, yeah, the idea of, I believe that as well about the soul, or the spirit, or, whatever is animating this form that is the constellation of me, right? All these different parts and pieces is not all of me. And, I recently had a fantastic conversation with some friends of mine where we said, it kind of means that we're already dead, which is great. Takes a lot of pressure off this. Like, we're always already dead. And then we come here and do this really intense thing. And it doesn't make this any less real, but we are already in that space. And that, for whatever reason, hit me at the right moment and the right time. And I was just like, yeah, it kind of took the pressure off a little bit, because I have a lot around death and, the approaching of death and what we do with it and how important it is as a reminder for life. And then the trauma, I kind of feel like that we do get to tell stories around our experiences, that they are not fixed in time and mean only one thing. I could have a story that I was a, deeply disturbed, hallucinating addict for 25 years or whatever. That's true. Maybe, except for maybe the hallucinations. But I could also have a story that those traumas, exactly as you said, were what brought me to a place where I'm not afraid of people's grief. I'm not afraid of people's pain and people's suffering. I have capacity to sit with that because I've survived my own. And so, was that part of my blueprint? I don't know the answer to that, but it's there. Yeah. it's if it can be sort of alchemized as something that can be of service, then that's the story that I want to tell about about the experiences. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Just knowing that you have that you can give, to have some kind of reference point, otherwise we're not grounded. So that's what, I guess, the story of ourselves, we can kind of look at that in different, like if it was like this ball, we can look at it from different angles, then that helps us somehow be able to, figure out how we can be of service. And then, you might surprise yourself. You start working with people, and then whatever comes out of your mouth, you surprise yourself, because that's just you knowing from that experience. It's in your blood, so to speak, how to be able to assess somebody. And I think that's kind of where if there was, like, I would say, like, an awakening, that's that spontaneity. I mean, there's different parts of it as far as stepping into joy, but also being able just to speak and to be able to assist somebody in the moment, almost like an emergency situation when people, they all of a sudden they come together and they just start working. It's kind of like doing that individually for people in a similar sense, where you know what to say, you know how to help them. And you're not thinking about, again, your training. It's within your blood. And from those experiences, you can kind of bring forth whatever that gift is for other people, that gift that you have for other people to receive. But yeah, that is interesting with, we're already kind of dead. Maybe that does take a lot of pressure off it. We're eternal, supposedly, we can never die. So it's okay that bodies wither away, and we get aches and pains. Maybe it doesn't feel good, but maybe we'll feel better at some point once we get back to that place.
That's the hope, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And never negating the realness of this place and our experience, how, it's hard here and it's not nothing. I think that for me, the kind of spiritual bypassing of going to another place or identifying with what I'm calling tentatively, as I kind of figure this out in my head, but this already dead part, the part of us that's already on that side or in that realm. Lots of suffering I gave myself by over-identifying with that and bypassing all of my suffering in this body, the reality of the body will wither away, that we will have loss and all of those things. It doesn't save us from any of that. It's very real. But it also means, I don't know, I guess for me, it kind of means we survive it. We get through it, and that hopefully we do it well so that it informs something on the other side.
Yeah. I think that in that survival or that getting through it is a part of being human, but it also shows our capacity to love, feeling those emotions, being in front of somebody that's dying, or whether that be an animal or a loved one, that just shows how much we actually have a capacity to love. And maybe that's like a unique trait that humanity only has. I don't know. Yeah.
I want to ask you a little bit about joy, because that is such a big one for me. There were so many years of my life when I was like, nope, no, thank you. Not even no, thank you. Like, I don't even know how to access joy. I don't know how to I was just sort of surviving all of the trauma. So kind of going back to sort of your story, you started with joy, did you have to re-find your way back to it? And did you, like me, ever feel that it was really dangerous? Like, joy started to feel really edgy and dangerous for me because I had gotten very used to suffering, and it felt very unsafe to sort of hope for something on the other side. I'm just curious if there's any resonance there.
Yeah, I think there is some resonance there. And just to go with what you said at the end, that we get comfortable with our traumas and with our suffering, I think that's very common. It's almost like we don't want to change. We know that it's right there. We know that joy is possible for us, but it's almost like we're too, well, what if I let go of my trauma? What if I let go of how I view the world? Then what? Who would I be? Maybe that's the fear there, is like, what would I be if I didn't have those things? So, yeah. And so getting back to the first part of the question, I think it is a journey, and maybe it isn't for some people. Maybe some people are just totally joyful their whole lives. I don't know, I think it's even simpler than we make it. And it's probably for us, because we're not us, I'm not talking about you and me or everybody, but just in general, in this Western world, we're so in the head that it's like, well, what would happen if we were to bring that energy down into our hearts? And that's where the children reside. That's where kids reside, is in their hearts. So I think the joy is linked to that sense of peace, inner peace. And then also it's linked to like our physical, energetic heart. And I say peace is because we have to have that peace first. From my experience, of course, I'm going back to my experience in order to experience that joy. Because I think joy is spontaneous. It's not something we can control. We can want it, but it tends to come in at a moment when we're not expecting it, or when I'm not expecting it. So that's where laughter is spontaneous, or deciding to do something that you wouldn't normally do, but your intuition guides you to do, to speak to somebody that you wouldn't normally speak to, or to do something, out of the ordinary. I think that can be joy as well. So joy doesn't have to be defined as just laughing and being happy. I think joy can be also being drawn or listening to that deeper part of us that's like the still small voice, or that part that's not the mind machine, that's talking all the time. And so for me, I feel like, at least now in my life, I do have those moments. I'm not seeking for more, but I know that there's more there. And I tend to find it more when I'm appreciative of myself, or whatever this meat suit or being or spirit or whatever it is, being appreciative of that. And then also being appreciative of just my, daily experience, people around me. Joy tends to come more from that place of appreciation, is what I found.
Mm. And can you talk about how, if there was a time when it wasn't that way, how it came to be that way again, or how did you go through a time in your life when you weren't feeling that, and sort of the journey to the place where you can now appreciate?
Yeah, so I had a near-death experience when I went to college, and I left Washington State to go to Humboldt State, and I ended up being there 2 years. When I went there, I started to get really depressed. I was still drinking. Humboldt is known for its premium marijuana, I guess. So I was smoking a lot of herb, and I was meeting some cool people, but it just felt very surface to me, I guess. But I was really drawn there because of the forest, the redwood forest, and it was also 5 miles from the beach, so I could go to the beach too. And it was like, oh, I've got beach and forest, like my two favorite things, You go a little bit further inland and there's mountains too. So I was very happy in that regard. But I felt like I just wanted to really kind of be withdrawn a lot. And I think that had to do with how I was not really understanding the depression that was coming on, and pushing it away in my teenage years by substances and partying and seeing Nirvana in little homes play, all those kinds of things, and punk rock. So I was just like pushing it away. And then so it was resurfacing. So now even though I was taking classes, I had there was a space now for that to come up. And nature, you could call it, allowed that space to open up within me. But I didn't see it that way at the time. I saw it more as like, who the fuck am I? I don't like myself, all of those kinds of feelings. And so I went into the forest, and I just tried to be with that as much as possible. That was get away from people, go into the magical redwood trees. But it became stronger. And I just, the sense of not liking who I am, and maybe that not liking who I was how I saw myself. It wasn't really who I am. It was more of just not liking how I looked, how I felt. I even had a girlfriend who I really loved, but I still didn't like myself. So I ended up breaking up with her, and getting to the point of like, what's the point? What's the point? It's like, why even be here? I knew that there was something better, of which felt like something better beyond this world to me. And I just wanted to go there. And so it became this experience, this conversation with whatever was out there, whoever would listen to me, to, please take me. I don't want to hurt myself. So just please set something up for me so I can go. Because this, this sucks. I almost said fucking sucks, but I didn't know if your audience would want me to swear it.
We love the word fuck, so you can say it as much as you want. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, my sailor mouth can really come out. I'll try to tone it down a little bit.
All of you is welcome, so however you want.
Thank you. Yeah, so everything I did, I took theater classes. That was another thing that I really loved doing. I had these really thick, long dreadlocks. I remember going to my theater teacher and saying, I want to be an actor, and he told me, well, you're going to have to cut your hair off. So then I cut my hair off, and then I felt worse about myself. I shaved my head, and so that was an outlet for me as well. I think if I didn't have those two things, the acting and the forest, or the nature, then I don't know what would have happened really. So, end of my second year, I decided it was getting heavier and heavier, and I didn't know how to process it. I didn't want to talk to anybody, Robin. It's like, I thought I was the only person in the world that felt this way. It's like, who would understand me? I'd go to a counselor, school counselor. Yeah, right. Like, they're going to talk about my classes or, ask that I see a psychiatrist. It's interesting that the world sees trauma in such a way that we feel like we have to treat it with drugs that just actually suppress it more. And I was like, I don't want to do that. So I didn't hurt myself, but I kept having that conversation of, please take me. I don't want to be here. And then just after my second semester, a few weeks, it was May 27th, 1997 is when I had that experience, when I crashed in the forest and had, I guess, a near-death experience or a near-death experience. I don't know whatever the labels are these days. I crashed on my bike. I hit a jump and I came down on my front tire and I hit my head, and I could just I don't know I don't even, when you're just going, when you have, there was a second of okay, this is it. But wasn't even thinking about it. I wasn't thinking, oh, what do I need to do, it just happened so fast that I think that I just kind of allowed it to happen and my body relaxed. And I believe that's why I didn't break any bones, because I wasn't tense. I just was just allowed it to happen. So yeah, my body left, or my spirit left, or whatever, that part of me left, and it didn't go to heaven. It went to my heaven, which was nature, and just saw it from a different perspective. And when I say I saw from a different perspective, I just felt like, you can take a breath. And I was at peace, and I felt as close to what I consider myself as I know. And just that feeling of expansion and peace, no worries, connection. And I could just sense the nature around me. I could feel the aliveness of it in ways that I never had before. I could, I could hear animals, but I felt like they were really close to me. I could see and hear the ocean that was way out, way at 5 miles, 10 miles away. And so I just kind of stayed in that space. I don't know how long it took. It actually is very interesting, because when I had these memories come back about this near-death experience, it wasn't like this happened, this happened, this happened. It was more like little pieces that I had to put together to tell a story, right? I mean, maybe this happened 2 days before and I was in my dream state. I don't really know, but it felt like this was the progression of it. It crashed. I went up into the trees right above the redwood trees. I began to be oversensitized to everything. And that was, there's more detail. I don't know how much detail I can tell you, but I basically looked back down at my body and just knew that part of me that I had been perceiving as myself wasn't really me, because this felt like me. It almost felt like the same feeling as when I was 4 years old. Just that joy and that expansion. So I was like, well, why, I'm thinking now, not thinking then, but thinking now, well, why the heck would I want to go back there? Because there was a question that came up, do you want to go further? whatever further meant. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or do you want to go back? And I said, I don't want to die. So it was that expanded part of me that was saying, I don't want to die, because it obviously knew better than the me that was like, doing this all the time.
Right.
And I went back into my body, and that's when I had an experience with fairies. Maybe I was still in that state, but I knew I was in my body because I could feel the pain. And then I saw fairies coming down from like the crowns of the redwoods, because they have these big, thick green crowns at the top. So I saw them coming down. They were there as support team. So maybe fairies are my angels. I don't know. So they look like little humans with wings. Maybe they were the fae. Maybe they're pixies. I don't know the terminology, but they look like little humans and different colors. And they were just kind of swirling around, going up and down and giggling. I remember the giggling because it was very high pitched and I knew it was giggling. And so I was just sitting there, and it didn't feel like I wasn't like, oh wow, oh my gosh, this is happening. It just felt natural, I guess you could say. I had an experience several months prior when I was laying on my girlfriend's bed, and I think she was in the other room doing homework, but I was laying there, and my heart was like, boop, 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 because I was really in love with this person. And when your heart's really open, your inner vision starts to open more. I don't know if that's your experience, but that's my experience.
It's a beautiful way to put it. I haven't thought of it in exactly that way, but I felt it when you said it.
Yeah. So I saw fairies then, just in my inner vision. They look like the same ones. They're the guardians of the redwoods. And so I was just watching that for a while. So when this was happening, I was back on the forest floor, the canopy of trees. It was like that, but my eyes were open from what I could see, from what I knew. And then I noticed my auditory senses began to really open, and I could hear this ringing sound, and I knew that it was the trees. And the beautiful trees were there to support me, and they were sending, because I could feel like these waves of energy moving through me. So it's the idea of the sound, and then just the energy that goes along with the sound washing through me. So as that was happening, I was like, okay, I'm in my body. And then I realized it was like, okay, I'm in my body and I'm feeling this. And then I could feel the pain again. And so my attention went off what was happening around me, and it just came back, and it was like, this horrible pain. And it was like my consciousness shut off at that point. So there's the story that I wasn't going to tell.
Yeah. And I understand that. I mean, there are parts of my story that, it's the experience that happens, right? It's this big thing that breaks down all of these ideas about consensus reality and is in some ways so glorious and so transcendent and amazing. And also for me as well, like right next to suffering. And it's difficult. And it's not integrated immediately. Like it takes a really long time to integrate it. It's life-changing, but not in a snap. Maybe for some people, but not for me. It wasn't. It's all of these things have been just continually sort of opening my beingness to this other way. And it needed to be authentic and to go slowly. So, and I also know that it's, having read my book and like just the process of writing a book and getting all of it down and out and turning it into a narrative, there is a time when it's like, okay, I'm done with this story. Because there's all these other things happening now that feel more present and important. Like those are really important. I'm really grateful for all of that. But that's not where I am today and now. So I understand that difficulty in telling the old stories. Yeah. So thank you very much for doing that.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So did you notice, like, when you were writing your book, did you have more memories come in as you were writing?
I did. I was paying attention to details that I think I would have let go. You know, I think I would have skipped over if it wasn't this slow process of, you know, in my book, I say I'm storytelling myself into being. I'm taking all of these things and turning them into a narrative. And so, yeah, a lot of memories came back. It was a very alive alchemical process to tell the story. And I feel like it really wanted to be told and really needed to happen. And I will very gratefully and lovingly send it on its way into the world when the book is done and in its like book form, and then it can go live its best life in the world, and I can continue with my life. Yeah,
that's awesome. That's a good way to look at it. Yeah. I mean, I've listened to I'm in chapter 6 now, so I haven't finished it, but yeah, thank you for giving that gift to the world. And
thank you.
now you're going to have a lot of people interviewing you, asking you to tell your story again. You're like, it's in the book.
I read it. I told it. I'm happy to talk about it, but it is interesting to see that process of like, because I was very attached to it, you know, at first. Did you experience that? Did you come out of that experience like, oh, something happened that was important? I mean, honestly, not every time something happened or every experience, but when I finally started to frame it, it became a very important story for me and had a lot of charge to it and a lot of healing power for me and just power in general in that story. So how was it for you?
Yeah, definitely the same for me. There was a lot of charge, like, oh, I need to tell this. And like I've said in the past to people, it's like, well, why are you telling this now? It's like, because of that reason. You know, it's healing for you. So, you know, some people might look at it as selfish. I mean, I don't look at it that way. I just look at it as that need to express and then help. Maybe it's like the completion of that healing process. You know, like we've done all of this work in the past, and for me, definitely wasn't immediate. I mean, it took me years to get to the point where I could actually tell it for the first time last year. Right?
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
I didn't realize it was that recent for you. Yeah, interesting. Yeah. So we're in similar places where like the intensity of telling it and the urgency to tell it, and then that wave sort of moves through, and it sounds like we're both kind of experiencing what's on the tail end of that. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, whatever is on the tail end of that, I don't know, but I know what you're saying. It's like that, at least the tail end of the storytelling aspect and the need to tell it. Yeah, so I think that's a good place to be too. You know, I guess the me not knowing is the like, what's the next thing? But that's okay not to be. It's good to be in that space too, right? So, there's a lot of possibilities. Yeah. So it was after my accident. It wasn't similar to other stories that I heard, and I really didn't listen to many NDE stories until, you know, just a few years ago, really, because you didn't hear about it much in the late 90s and the early 2000s, and, you know, who am I going to tell the story to? But there was also the integration process. So being able to get to the point where I could actually remember everything and form a story about it didn't happen. You know, I was getting like pieces of it and remembering, you know, of course I remembered right when I was even getting out of the hospital. I was like, I remembered the fairies but I wasn't like thinking like, oh, what does that mean? Or, you know, what's the big message? Or I just felt like, why am I still here? You know, this sucks. And now after all of these emotions that I haven't processed, now I'm in a body that feels like crap. And I have to heal that. It's like just another thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it actually became what I was feeling before emotionally and, psychosomatic, all of that stuff took on like an intense new form
Mm.
after that experience where it got so intense. You just have to face it. You just have to feel it. You just have to look at it. You don't have to think about what it means. You just have to be with it. And that's what I had to go through for many years. I keep saying we, but I mean me, really. So it was like I still lived my life. I went and traveled. I went to Australia, ended up going to drama school, came back to Hawaii for a while, then went to LA. So I still lived my life, but I could only process or deal with what I could at the time. So I couldn't do, the first 9 months were very intense. I had to go through a body healing and I had some help doing that from somebody. And then with the body healing, of course, comes all the other stuff because, one part of your body's touched, then all the memory comes up from that one area. So I could only deal with, even though it was tense, I couldn't deal with it all at once. And it felt like it wanted to be dealt with all at once.
Mm-hmm.
But I just couldn't. So I didn't really do drugs anymore. I didn't really drink, every once in a while. Maybe I had something up until I think it was like even 15 years ago, 10 to 15 years ago. I was like, I can't do any of that anymore. It was more so kind of escaping, or not even really escaping, Robin. It was more focusing on my creativity, just to try to get back into that place of joy. And so that's where acting came in for me. Getting on the stage or getting in front of the camera. I ended up going to LA for a while, doing a lot of commercials and working with some great coaches there and having a blast doing that. And simultaneously learning about body work and healing. I saw what could be done with the people that helped me. There were a few people that helped me, and I was like, oh, well, that's cool. So then I ended up studying that, and that became a big part of my journey as well, learning body work and touching people and moving through my own stuff as I'm touching people, and then also helping, just learning techniques and tools, I guess you could say. So, I mean, that's a lot in just a few paragraphs, I know, but.
Thank you for sharing all of that. It's really, it's so many things, because I'm finally, after all my years of kind of repressing things and not being able to work directly with the things that we're calling to be worked with. Like, I'm finally deeply entering into somatics and body work and things like that. So you bringing forward the idea of like doing the healing work and having, one part of your body is holding all of these things, not just from the accident, it sounds like, but also the things that we hold in our body that want to come up to be seen. And it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot of sensation. It's a lot of emotion. And from my experience is that as the capacity builds for that, then we have space to feel all of that needs to be felt. And also just being with is a big deal for me. I work with that a lot with my clients and for myself. Can I just be with this? Even if I can't, the whole thing can't move through right now, but just being with this. So yeah, I love that you explored the healing modalities that were helpful for you. And that's a common story for me and for others, I think, as well, as this. We gather the tools and then can use those tools to help others.
Yeah.
Because of the trauma. Yeah.
So I'm in Hawaii. I am doing, I guess you could say, I'm working with people in a capacity where they can talk to me about what's going on, and then I don't even consider it me. It's more like just kind of these eyes come through and I can see what's going on as they're talking and what their, whatever their pains or their experiences at that time. And I can kind of see where the thread is. Maybe it goes back to the past. Maybe it's even something from the future that they're experiencing now. And I don't manipulate the universal flow of energy. So it's nothing like that. It's more so giving them the space to talk. And as they do so, as me just kind of being there as a facilitator, I appear to see changes happening. So I don't like saying that I do anything. Mm-hmm. It's really weird because I know that's the traditional kind of, you go to a massage therapist or you go to a healer and they put their hands on you and transformation happens, or you go to a therapist and, you do hypnotherapy. I don't, and there's nothing wrong with that because everybody has something different. And I'm not saying what I do is better or worse or anything like that, but it appears to be what had progressed was me doing a lot of body work, cranial sacral, anything from cranial sacral therapy to deep tissue therapy. And then during that time, the same thing. So I'm just going back, was happening. So I could see as I was holding people, for example, or touching them, I could see these patterns around them, whether they were talking about it or not. If they were talking about it, they would light up these patterns within them and around them. Whatever that was, I don't know what they were. It could have been a belief. It could have been a past trauma. I don't know exactly what it was, but it would light up. And then I would just kind of watch that dissipate. Whatever was they were holding on to, whatever that pattern was, would just begin to just kind of fall apart or dissipate. And then they would get off the table and be like, oh, what the hell happened? That was amazing. So I did get burned out doing body work in a way, because it became too much for me. So as that was happening, I began to see that I could do the same thing without having to touch somebody. I did even have training a long time ago from somebody who I considered my first spiritual teacher. She didn't call it quantum healing at the time. She called it the pulse technique. Her name was Jo Dunning. And then she developed into something called the quick pulse. And I didn't really go through her whole training program. I was at the first class. She was here on this island in Hawaii. I mean, it was a great experience. And so I had that, but I think I didn't really, I used it once in a while, but it wasn't really a part of the work that I was doing, my repertoire of my modalities. So I don't have a name for what I do. I don't even call it healing. I just say, session. And that's what I call it. So, and, of course, it's, the right people come to me. I notice, and that's what I ask for. And within that, I ask that people take responsibility for their own healing, because you can only really do that. And then we'll just see what happens, is what I would say. Let's just see what happens. So sometimes they'll tell me what's going on with them. And then we might do a process where we close the eyes and I'll just have them focus on certain areas of the body or around the body or certain situations, whatever that is. And usually I'd say 90% of the time they're open enough where there can be a transformation that happens. Sometimes they're not ready, so it won't happen. Usually though, the people will come and they'll be ready for whatever change that they're ready for their own lives. So yeah, I wish I could tell you something grand. Like I do this amazing thing where I take out implants and, maybe that's part of what happens. I don't know, but I think it's more so just being in a space where they can express themselves. A lot of people will just, as soon as they talk to me, will just start crying, which I think is a wonderful, beautiful thing. Even if that's what happens the whole session, how awesome is that? Right.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I love that. I love that you don't have a name for it. I struggle with that myself. Like, what is it that's happening here? And what do I do with it? And what do I call it? The progression of moving from the physical contact as well to being able to do it remotely. But do you see things? So are you literally seeing with your eyes these patterns and points and things that kind of light up. And my second question around that is, was the experience of being out of body and being connected to that other place, do you attribute that to these gifts, or is it just, part of you that's something that's developed over time?
Okay, so do I see things? Sometimes sometimes I see things, but it's more, I feel what they're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they don't feel it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, even if they're numb to it, I still feel what they're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I don't know how to explain it. I could put a label on it and say, an empath or something like that. But it's like feeling it or noticing it sometimes before they say it, if they realize it themselves, or noticing it if they don't say it. And I usually won't be like, oh, you have this, because that doesn't give them the opportunity to grow and to discover for themselves. So I never, if I get a piece of information or a sense or a feeling, I'm not going to say anything that they don't know themselves already, because I believe people have their own right to discover on their own whatever that thing is. So it's like feeling it, and then from that place of feeling it, then there might be a pattern, or I can see like a geometric pattern, or I can see a little scene from some moment in time. They had like a little tiny scene. And then just fairly recently, their family members that deceased have been coming through. Like they'll just come right through and say something to me. And I know they want me to tell them something, so I will tell them something. And that's been happening probably the last, I don't know, like 4 months. So I'm like, okay, so how do I deal with this? Well, usually what will happen is if that comes first, that voice, I'll wait and be like, okay, whatever, But then if they say something like, oh, and my dad passed away last year, then I'll be like, okay, now I can say something. Otherwise I'm not going to just be like, there's a spirit that just came through that said,
Yeah.
So I guess it's more feeling what they're feeling than anything when it comes down to it. And then the second part of your question, maybe my NDE had something to do with it. I don't know, but I think I'm kind of, I like you in a way, like it's been a really long progression. So it's hard to make that connection. That's why my quote unquote gifts came about, is because of my NDE, because it's been, lots of trauma, lots of learning, lots of figuring out, lots of processing, lots of being with whatever over 25 years from when that happened. So maybe.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Yeah, thank you. I have a area of great interest to me, which is, how do people who have these experiences integrate it into their lives? Because I think for a really long time, I just thought that people who, had mystical experiences or NDEs or did the kind of work that you're doing and the kind of work that I'm now doing, that they kind of arrived fully formed. They just woke up at 20 years old and went, this is my life and this is what I'm going to do. And it's real easy. It's all clear. I just assumed that that's the way that it was. And now the more that, my own journey and then talking to other people who've gone through these experiences, I'm realizing like, that's not it at all. And it's so difficult. I've had the dead come to me as well. And I must admit, I was like, no, thank you. Nothing against the dead. And I don't really have a lot of fear of that, but I have enough going on. It was just one more thing when I didn't have the capacity for it. And so the idea of, like your question of like, what do I do with this? Or how do I approach this? Or being sort of the voice from someone's dearly beloved deceased relative, and then bringing through that message I would feel a huge responsibility and could be very healing, but also, intense for folks. So I think it's really interesting that that's just come on for you in the past 4 months. And your questions are what mine would be like, okay, how do I do this? And what do I do with this? Yeah. Do you want to talk about kind of how it feels to like embody and integrate these experiences that happen?
Yeah. Well, like, first of all, it's like, there's a real strong permission, I think, that has to happen when you work with people. And I kind of agree with you. Like, I don't know if I want that as far as that experience with, that is a huge responsibility to it's like, am I just hearing this? Is it, is it just my mind speaking? I don't want to give them the wrong message, and usually the message seems to be like, oh yeah, well, that's right on. But I don't want to consider myself a medium. I don't want people to come to me for that at all. Honestly. So the integration of experiences, I think, if where I am today, whatever that is, if I were to be there like 2 days after my near-death experience, like it would be like blown out of the water. Like I wouldn't be able to handle life. It would be too much. So I think, or I feel that it's really important that whatever people are going through, it's to take your time with it, whatever that is. Maybe people are able to process really fast. I've seen people like be able to do, amazing things within seconds. So that's great, but if it's like really intense, just be gentle with yourself, whatever that is. And that's what I've learned how to do, is having to be gentle with myself, whatever I'm experiencing. Cause kind of like you, it's like, you can only talk about so much. It's like, well, you talked about a lot in your book, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, oh man, I don't know if that answers your question, Robin, but it's, how do you feel that too? Like, do you feel like you just have to be kind of gentle with that process for you? Or are you able to integrate really fast?
No, not at all. I mean, I think faster nowadays than before. I think it has, I have an understanding more of what's going on and how to meet things that come up, but so it's faster, but it's never fast. And I have a motto that I, learned from one of my teachers, and it is, the fastest way through is slow, that just like try to be slow and spacious. And also, like you talked about earlier, like I spent a lot of time not liking myself and being really hard on myself. And I could never like hate myself enough into someone that I would love. It just did not work that way. So now it is. It's like I center my tender parts. I center the vulnerable self. I go at the pace that is safe for that aspect. I do the same with my clients. Like we move at the pace of the most vulnerable self, so that, because it's very easy to re-traumatize ourselves by trying to rush through these things or thinking we need to get somewhere, as you were saying in the beginning, like, where are we going? It's more nowadays sort of just watching things unfold and letting it go at a pace that I can process through my body in a way that feels really good and safe for my body, which is brand new. Like I was rough on my body for so long. Yeah. Oh yeah. This is like, this is probably maybe 3 to 4, 5 years. I'm closing in on 7 years sober. So there was like the trauma of the, like not being sober for a while and having to deal with all of the things that were repressed. And then this new thing is coming in, which is very slow, but it's about respecting the body, respecting the need for safety. Safety is probably my number one thing, is safe for myself and safe for others. And so that often requires slowness and spaciousness. So yeah.
So just curious, because I know that I've heard that a lot. Like, this is a safe space. I got to be safe with myself. What does that mean for you? When you say safety?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Let me sit with that for a second. I mean, I think safety means, I do think that safety and slowness and spaciousness are all really entwined, because if I feel rushed, or if I'm in a nervous system response, if I'm like really triggered and I decide to take action in that moment, or if I decide to, it doesn't really happen very much anymore, but there was a time when I would, get into these really negative self-talk patterns because of being in a trauma response. So the part that I was talking to, I was just abusing, it was just hard on that part of me to hear that stuff and be told those things. I was not safe for myself. And so now developing the capacity to like feel when a trauma response is coming up, feel when something is arising. And it's just practice, but I notice now it's like, ooh, if I have an urge to jump in my truck and go camping alone for 5 days in the middle of nowhere, that's fine. That's a great thing to do. And I love doing that. But if I really want to just like throw like a bag and not do any planning and just like jump in and go right now, it's probably not that I want to go camping. It's probably that I want to just get the fuck out of here, So now when that arises, it's like, okay, I'm going to slow down. Like, what's actually going on here? Because I've driven away from places unsafe. I have that flight instinct where I'll just go. And so now it's like, I have the capacity to be with myself a little more, find out what's going on, try to meet whatever need is arising, try to be with the part that feels really unsafe. And that turning towards, that courageous friendliness, that maitri, that, that Sanskrit maitri, that loving kindness, being with, turning towards, engaging with, gives me safety. And then when I'm safe, I can be safe for other people. Then I'm not reacting from my trauma, basically. So, yeah, how does that land?
Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, what a great description. Yeah. I don't really think about safety too much. I guess it's all somatics, right? I mean, as far as, but it's more so what you're saying is like, for you, that feeling of safety is like, it's like that honoring of you, right? Whatever's going on. And that's, I guess, what that would be the same for me. I don't know what term I would use, but it's just like that honoring of me is the most important. Because if you don't do that, how can you do anything for anybody, right? So, and then you have this intuition also, which is you. I mean, there's no separate part of you from that intuition. That is a whole different kind of creature when it comes to following that, because I think I had mentioned earlier, you don't know exactly what it's going to tell you. It might tell you to, make a steak tonight if you're a vegan, might.
Yeah, I've been there.
Really?
Yes, 100%. I have. Yes. Yep. Part of my story. I love the word honoring. Yeah, I love that. That's such a perfect word for that, honoring the self.
Yeah. And it might be like, also like, I'm going to jump in the truck right now. I haven't made any plans. I'm going to go camping, and you grab your stuff and go. But it's different than trying to get away, right? It's like going to that joy as opposed to getting away from your environment. So I think that also could be safety, is that like following that passion or that whatever that excitement thing is for you, because that takes you away from, you're not denying your fear, but it takes you away from that space of, well, what if this happens? What if,
right?
I guess that mental mind space.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Often, when that feeling arises for me, and I've learned to slow down with it, sometimes that is what that part of me that's feeling, really vulnerable needs. It's like, let's get some distance and let's go somewhere and sit where I can have a 360 view. There's this place that I go that's just in the middle of nowhere, and it's pretty flat, and I can see just sky and earth 360. And it's like, that's what I need. And so I can honor that need, but not from exactly what you're saying, as a sort of joyful, kind of adventurous, responding to an inner request, rather than like, it feels like, even though there's no monster in the room right now, it feels like there is, and I got to get the fuck out of here. That's a very different way of being. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I have one final question for you, and I don't know why it has been coming up lately as the final question, but I noted that you use the word she when speaking about God or about this bigger thing or about this presence. You said he or she, but you said she.
I did say she. I did say it. I don't know what it is, but it feels like it's, we're so split here on the planet when it comes. I mean, it's not just our genitalia, obviously, but it's wording and our ideas about what it is to female consciousness and male consciousness. And there's a lot of confusion around that, I think, here, where from what I believe, and I don't know, from what I believe, not my experience, but from what I believe, that it's just, it makes sense to me that, the female is the one that gives birth, that the birth of creation, that would be what God is. That would make sense to me, that creative energy. I don't know if that's true, but it makes sense to me. I don't know what your question is. Sorry.
Yeah. But, no, that's great. That's great. I mean, and the question was, do you feel like you have a relationship with some sort of, all these words are so loaded, right? And they've been commodified is what they've been. This is what has happened to them. So the word, the divine feminine, or the goddess, or the great cosmic mother, which is one of my favorites, like they've been taken and they've been commodified and they've been turned into different things. But so without, if we can strip away all of the kind of cheesiness or ungroundedness that surrounds that language. But the question is about the feminine. And I'll tell you the reason I'm asking the question, which is I was totally caught off guard when she arrived. In the middle of like all these experiences and this healing and all this somatic things, there came a time when this connection to this presence came through. And it felt like it's coming, to me, it feels like it's coming from the earth for sure. And also this really, it's sort of the biggest force that I can experience, that I have capacity for, or that I have experienced so far. And it is feminine. It is, and it is, I understand it's not as simple as, it's not binary. It's like not man, woman, and it's not, doesn't mean one thing's better than the other. But I was very astonished when she arrived. And so just because you brought in that, I was curious if if you had a relationship with sort of a feminine divinity or something along those lines. So that was my question. Yeah.
Okay. But can I ask you first when she came in for you?
So in my early 20s, I feel like she was talking to me a lot. I used to have these dreams that I had great dreams about Aphrodite coming, and she was funny. She was really like warm and funny. And in the dreams, she was married to Jesus. And she was like, I love Jesus, but some days I do not mind when he goes off to get crucified, and it's just like, it's very funny. Nice. She called him Joe. She called Jesus Joe affectionately. And she, so I had all these dreams, and I was very ungrounded in that, but I was earnest, so I was like belly dancing and gardening and hanging out with my female friends and talking about the goddess a lot. But I didn't, other than the dreams and this sort of idea of what I thought the feminine was, I didn't really have a direct experience of her. And then in the last 3 or 4 years, same kind of time frame, I just started to feel a different presence than I had ever felt before. And it has to do with the slowness and the body, being very embodied versus sort of being up and out and in these other realms, but being like down in the body. So yeah, so relatively recently, but kind of undeniably. Yeah.
That's awesome. It feels like that to me too. It feels like it's coming from the earth. Like that could be the, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's like, we're here on the earth and we're in these bodies. These bodies are part of the earth. So it would make sense that even this whole idea of ascension or connection to something greater would come through the earth first and through our bodies so we could feel that, as opposed to like coming down or going out. Or I don't maybe have the same experience as you, but it's more so just I feel what you described to me as what you're feeling through your body. I have that similar feeling. I could feel it as you were describing it. That's why I know. Like I could feel that coming up through my toes and up my legs, and it feels like that. If you were to describe it as feminine energy, yes, it does feel like that more so than I guess that male energy. And I've had the experiences of both, but and I think being in places, living in places that are not cities, it's easier to feel that. Being off grid, it's easier to feel that because you don't have the same kind of electrics, on the grid. But yeah, that feeling that you were feeling, that I just felt from you, like I feel that when I go barefoot and walk outside. And I know there's a goddess here. We have goddess Pele, Tutu Pele. I felt her the moment I first came here in 1998, which was just a year after my NDE. I helped my mom move here. I felt that instantly, and so did my mom. So I feel that connection she's a very specific goddess. And then I feel that with the nature around me too. It's like, I feel like even my cats embody that, the animals embody that same. So whether that's God, I don't know, but I'm more familiar with that than what might be considered like a God energy. Because I don't really know what that is, but I can identify more with the planet and that energy coming through me. So I think that's pretty cool that you feel that too.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. Yeah, the connection with nature, and sometimes I call that force life herself. It's just this thing. It's just what is moving through everything. And I've had an experience with Pele that was very intense when I lived on the Big Island. We walked, I had a friend visit, and we walked out to sort of the newest land, right? Like the land that had just been created. And that was powerful. And my experience of her was just pure creation energy that was unfiltered through any of my own sort of mental preferences about what creativity looks like. It was just this raw creative force. Really, really, really powerful. So yeah, I was kind of afraid of her. I stayed over by Mauna Loa a lot. He's like old and quiet, and he's just a big presence, a big steady presence. I didn't go down by Pele very often because she's very intense. Yeah, very powerful.
Yeah, she is.
The cloud people came today and tumbled and rumbled through the valley, dropping small hail that popcorned in the grass, and I could feel them, the cloud people, and feel how much work they had to do, taking care of all of the plants and animals and green things in the whole wide world. I could feel that they knew the valley needed nitrogen, so they headed our way to deposit the hail and rain and lightning and thunder, and I could see the plants and trees reaching up, stretching up to them to receive the bounty. I said, "Thank you," to the cloud people, and the rain and hail suddenly thundered down so loud I could only be inside the fullness of that sound. And I remembered the 4 who are one who pulled me up and out and into that sound, and I know in my bones that I am not alone, and that everything, every single thing, is alive and animate. And I know what the materialists will say, and I feel sorry for them and that they can't see the world this way. After I'm dead, I'll remember this day, and it will entice me back to this planet to play again, to remember the cloud people again, and to feel them bring the rain. Thanks for listening, everyone. For folks who are new to the podcast, go back to the first episode, Preface. where you can listen to me read my entire book to you, also titled Earth, A Love Story, which will be published this summer. If you'd like to support this show, please subscribe and leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and please share this podcast with others. Our musical soundscapes are by Morgan Jenks. You can support his new album on Bandcamp and find out more information at morganjenks.com. And finally, to book a one-on-one session with me or to share your own account, visit honeyheart.org.